Okay, hello grade 9 students and welcome to your final Reachback of the week. Friday's here, finally. You're correcting your second Reachback. Let's get right into the questions. The first question, A and B, asks you to write as an expression. It says the product of a number. So of course, if I take my highlighter here, the product, that means multiplication. So of a number, so we're going to multiply a number by 7/10. And when you multiply a number is going to be algebraically x. And when you multiply it by 7/10, we're going to treat that 7/10 because a coefficient is multiplication. We're going to treat 7/10 like a coefficient. And we're going to divide by 13/100. So we're going to divide that by 13/100. Now what looks weird here is that we have fractions over fractions. So let's change this to 7/10 divided by 13/100. Both of these are the exact same thing. So if I grab my highlighter again, this and this are the same thing. Now obviously, since we're using this line here as a division, it's probably important that we use it in decimal form instead, but either way is fine. And the second question of the writing as an expression says the sum, which of course means multiplication, or addition, excuse me, of a number and 3/10. So we're going to add a number and 3/10. We can either use this or we can use a number plus 3/10. Either one works. All multiplied by decimal 6 repeating. So all multiplied by decimal 6 repeating. Now decimal 6 repeating over here, I'll put this over here. So 0.6 repeating. But 0.6 repeating as a fraction is 2/3. So because you have different forms, you can either write it like this, which is correct, or like this. Either way is correct. Question 2 says write an expression in words. So now you could say a number plus 1, or the sum of a number and 1, either one's fine, divided by 3. So a number plus 1 divided by 3, or the sum of a number and 1 divided by 3. Those are acceptable answers. However, I like this one better. How about the sum of a number and 1, but instead of putting the sum, we're going to put in front of it a third of the sum of a number and 1. So this being divided by 3 is the same thing as saying a third of, right? Because you're dividing it into 3 parts. So either way would work. And finally here, we could say, if we think about this one, we can say 2 times a number increased by 2 and then comma tripled, or negatively tripled, or multiplied. Sorry, I can't say tripled. I have to say multiplied by, all multiplied by -3. There you go. These were a little complicated to do because there are acceptable variations to these. So if you had something different, it could be right. But just take note of the ones that we did here today. Getting into the rest of the meat and bones of your solving using opposite operation. We're going to take this and get rid of your constant first, which is 5, and we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. A negative 5x, remember this is still a part of your coefficient, is equal to negative 30. Divide both sides by negative 5, and x will equal a positive 6. Question 4, your constant is negative 4.2, so we're going to add 4.2 to both sides to get rid of your constant. A tenth of a number is equal to negative 2. Divide both sides by a tenth, and x will equal negative 20. Or if you take 2, let's bring it over here. 2 divided by a tenth, that's 100th, equals 20. Or if you had $2 divided into piles of 10 cents, how many piles would you make? You would make 20 piles. Okay, next question. Question number, I skipped one here. There's Madame Michelle listening to music in the background. Hello, Madame Michelle. We're making a math video. That's okay. So question number 5, we have a distributed property question. So there are two ways to do this. You could clone, and you can bring it over here. You could first use division first. So instead of having two groups of negative 5x minus 1, if I divide it by 2, I can have one group of negative 5x plus 1 equals negative 25. And then I could simply get rid of it by subtracting 1 from both sides. Negative 5x equals negative 26. Divide both sides by negative 5. And x will equal 5 and 1/5, or 5 decimal 2. I think I did that right. Hopefully I did. We'll see. The other way you could have done it is expand it using distributive property by multiplying both terms inside the brackets by 2. Here you'd get negative 10x plus 2 equals negative 50. Then you can subtract 2 from both sides. You get negative 10x equals negative 52. Divide both sides by negative 10. And x equals 5.2, or 5 and 2/10, or 5 and 1/5. Okay, and question 6. There are variables on both sides of the equation here. So when you have that, remember what we said in the last video, it's important to get rid of the variable from one side. So I'm going to subtract or put a negative x on both sides. That gets rid of my positive x. Leave me with negative 1 equals 9x minus 19. Now I have a constant of 19, which I'm going to divide both sides by, or subtract, or add to both sides. 9x equals 18. Divide both sides by 9, and x will equal 2. Question 7. Now there are two ways to do this, and I will do it both ways. I can grab it here. Bring it down, I think. Clone this. Bring it over hither. And we'll do it both ways. So the first way is to subtract a half from both sides. You get rid of the constant. You have a fifth of x is equal to 7 over 10, take away 5 over 10, which is 2 over 10. Or if you wanted to, you could reduce that down to lowest terms. 2 over 10 is in lowest terms 1 over 5. Then you're going to divide by 1/5 to get rid of the multiply by 1/5. And dividing by 1/5, any number divided by itself is always 1. So I can put 1, or I can change it to multiplication by the reciprocal. And when I use the reciprocal, I get 5 over 5, which is still 1. Okay, so the answer is x equals 1. And I'm going to erase the rest of this stuff here. So x equals 1. Now, alternatively, you could have taken this, interpreted as being x over 5 plus 1 over 2 equals 7 over 10, and you're going to multiply both sides. Remember, you can multiply both sides by a common multiple. In this case, I'm going to choose 10, which is a common multiple of all three denominators. I'm going to expand using distributive property. So 10 over 1, or 10, multiplied by x over 5. 10 over 1 multiplied by 1 over 2. And 7 over 10 multiplied by 10 over 1. Of course, as we talked about before, it's always easiest to cross-reduce. That gives me 2x plus 5, or a positive 5, equals 7. I'll bring this over here. Hang on one second. Let's just grab this. Bring this over here. I'm running out of space. Subtract 5 from both sides. 2x equals 2. And divide by 2. And x equals 1. So either way you do it, you get the same answer. Probably the first way was easier, but if you did the second way, it still got you the same answer. And finally, a long, convoluted, difficult-looking question that's not that hard. Let's just go ahead and solve it using the one way. I'm going to add 1 and 3/8 to both sides. So I'm going to add 1 and 3/8 to this side. I'm going to add 1 and 3/8 to this side. Okay, so I'm going to have x minus 8 over 2 on this side. But over here, I'm going to change it to improper fractions. Change it to equivalent fractions with common denominators. I'm going to end up with 55/16. And I'm going to keep it as 55/16. I am not going to change it to a mixed fraction yet, because my next step is to get rid of this part here by multiplying both sides by 2. So I'm going to multiply the side by 2 and get x minus 8 is equal to, now remember we're multiplying, so 55 over 16 multiplied by 2 over 1, I'm going to cross reduce. That's going to give me 55 over 8 as an answer. Now because my next step is going to be adding 8 to both sides, I can kind of see what my next step is going to be. I'm going to change this to improper, or a mixed, excuse me, which is going to be 6 and 7/8. Okay, because 55/8 is 6 and 7/8. And now I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and x is going to equal 14 and 7/8. Now if I made a mistake, I apologize, but I have no idea if I did or not. So if I did make a mistake, just let me know. Send me a hateful letter and let me know that I made a mistake, and I'll make a correction. But thank you guys for tuning in. Next week we're back to normal because there are no holidays next week, and you will have an enrichment question for Friday, so make sure you try that. And as always, stay safe, maintain social distancing, and don't let your boomer parents drive you crazy.